start straight off with the introduction. In the back there, with a beautiful lady here just started a wonderful relationship. I was so struck by this example, even to the extent of learning a few to befriend her small dog Junga from a sojourn in Spain. Tonight, they celebrated for soulmates. Her father was a local dentist. Her mother was a popular secretary to the governor. The lady was born in Montreal at a first and then went on to study English and French. After completing a postgraduate diploma in education at the University of London, she traveled to Spain, where she studied Spanish and taught English as a second language. On her return to the Bahamas, she taught at St. Andrew's School for about 4 years, and then to the College of the Bahamas. She received a Commonwealth Scholarship to study a master's degree in linguistics at the University of London, and she's due to retire from COB next year December, after 37 years of dedicated service. This lady and her husband co-authored the Harbour Island story and updated the Paradise story written by her father. She has presented linguistic papers in a few Caribbean linguistic conferences, and here is to present on language migrations, roots of Bahamian Vernacular. I have the pleasure to introduce my wonderful wife, Florence, Laura, Anne, Albury, Lawlor.
Oh my gosh, I think he could compete with Wordsworth, don't you? Thank you, Jim. Is the mic in the right place? Lorraine, can you take? No? All right. Is this any better? That's worse. All right, is this good? Yes. All right, thank you very much. This evening, obviously, you see the title on the screen there. I am going to look at language migrations to the Bahamas. I'm really glad to finally get a chance to do this paper at the Bahamas Historical Society. A lot of the research was based on a paper that I gave at a linguistics conference last summer. And as some of you might know, I've been posted to do this several times, but for various reasons I've never got a chance. So I am glad to finally get here to share some of this research with you. And before I start, I really do, well, you will see as the power slides go up, I have to acknowledge Jim's design and his patience in working with me to provide some visuals to support the discussion that I would like to take you through. All right, so if I could start, the consideration of language roots to the Bahamas has always been fraught with problems because of the sporadic and intermittent migration of early settlers, both of European and African ancestry. But in the 21st century, it is amazing how research has become so much more accessible on the internet. And databases of, for example, shipping records have provided information that allows us to uncover the past with heretofore unimagined specificity. I need to start with clarifying some of the linguistic terms that I'm going to rely on as we go through the paper. First off, the difference between Creole slave and African or Bozal slave. The Creole, a person born in the Americas of African ancestry. Sorry? Oh, sorry. I just can't do this then. A person born in the Americas of African ancestry versus a person born in Africa. A Creole language refers to a language that is birthed in the Americas and predominantly used by speakers of African ancestry. So it is structurally a fusion of a colonizing language and an African language. So We have many of those throughout the Caribbean, for example. We have French Creoles that are spoken in Guadeloupe and Martinique and, of course, Haiti. We have Spanish Creoles that are spoken off the coast of Colombia and also in Aruba and Curacao. And there are some Dutch Creoles as well. So whatever colonizing nations from Europe took place in this colonization of the Caribbean islands, we actually have a Creole that would be based on those languages from Europe. So we come to Creole English, which is new language systems which emerged in the Americas under conditions of slavery and which incorporated features of a colonial English dialect with those of West African languages. And with the examples of this would of course be Jamaican Creole, the Gullah Creole that's spoken on the Sea Islands off the coasts of Georgia and Carolina. And we're going to include, of course, Bahamian Creole English, the language that emerged in 18th century Bahamas, predominantly spoken by people of African ancestry. It is the foundation or roots of the mother tongue of the majority of Bahamians today. The most important term that we need to look at, because it undergirds the entire paper, is the concept of linguistic realization. Linguistic acculturization. This is the extent to which African versus English features fuse in the emergent language systems. The process of acculturalization was obviously different in every contact situation and depended on social conditions such as the nature of the economy. The fact that we had in our early history a maritime economy is very, very important to the language that evolved over time. We have the next one, the distance. Well, all of the rest of those bullets basically are tied into the fact that we started off as a maritime economy. Therefore, when we are looking at the fusion between the colonial English dialect that was spoken by the settlers, by the colonists in the 1700s, then we have to see that this particular language and the fusion with the African systems really depended on where people were migrating from at this point in time. So the demographic growth is important, the interaction between master and slave is important, and obviously the nature of the work. So that basically, when you look at the concept of acculturization, you have to recognize that the Africans who worked on classic sugar plantations, for example, in Jamaica, had less access to the English dialect models. And the emergent language system, therefore, had more African transfer. In contrast to Africans who worked in a maritime economy with more access to English dialect models, and therefore less African transfer. This paper, I'm at this point I'm saying I am tracing the language migrations. I'm not looking at the colonial English dialect contribution or migrations to the vernacular that's spoken in the Bahamas today. I'm looking specifically at the language migrations, both direct and indirect, from